If the current president, who is in favor of these camps being set up and wants to see them set up all over the country, is also toying with the idea of stripping American citizens of that citizenship so that they can be deported, held in these facilities under these conditions, who's to say it can't be you? Who's to say it can't be your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, your friend, your teacher, your professor, co-workers, parish leader, the people at your mosque, your synagogue, your temple, your church, the people at your climbing gym, the people that you pass by when you're doing your morning run, the people that you see in the grocery store, the nice workers that help you bag your groceries. It easily can be. And it might be. Faster than you know it. Nuremberg. More than just a funny word that kind of sounds like burger. Human Rights Watch put out a report, July 21st, 2025, that's today at time of recording, on the conditions of the so-called immigrant detention centers. There's another, phrase that more accurately describes them that I will use past the beginning of the video because I'm on YouTube and, they like to censor brave truth tellers like myself. Quote, "You feel like your life is over. Abusive practices at 3 Florida immigration detention centers since January 2025. Before we get into this, I seem to remember one youtube.com/@conure putting out a video seemingly ages ago in which one Ron DeSantis is depicted, not that one, even though that's also there. I didn't make that, by the way. That's just a meme I stole from the internet. As depicted in a way that I think is, when it comes to political satire, pretty scathing. I think the first time was the Why Do Conservatives Hate Humanity video from 2 years ago. 3 years ago, Joe Rogan reveals the absolute depths of his stupidity. I've been talking about this for a long time, okay? So long, in fact, that the very first video that I forgot somehow in the video that you're currently watching when I recorded it was on this exact topic. You can see it in the thumbnail. The title is a bit of a funny jab. Try to get people to click on it in my early days, 5 whole years ago, about Donald J. Trump's first administration after the unfortunate but incredibly predictable, at least by those paying attention, loss of Hillary Clinton, and essentially his continuation and acceleration of the horrible Obama-era immigration policy. This has been going on for longer than I've been alive. Things like this have happened in a variety of different places across the world. It is not unique to America. It is not even unique to the country that allusions were made to in the beginning of the video. It's not unique to any one culture, creed, race, whatever. It seems to be, in my estimation, a fundamental flaw within the hearts, the souls, the minds, however you want to calculate where this might originate, whatever it is, of people who are power hungry and willing to do whatever it takes to meet their end, which is the removal of a so-called undesirable that they have dictated isn't worthy of moral consideration, isn't worthy of sharing the same earth as them. This has happened in a variety of different places, and it is happening again in the United States of America, as we've seen over the years, even 5 years ago, now today. Also, yes, I've seen the Jacob Geller video. It's really good. It came out after I had recorded this. You should go watch it. Not only when it comes to DeSantis's attacks on the trans community, his attacks on the black population of America, the brown population of America, Latinos, Muslims, anybody that doesn't happen to be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christian, whatever. But that was 3 years ago. Let's talk about 2025, because believe it or not, things have gotten worse. Summary. Among the flurry of immigration-related executive orders marking the second presidential administration of Donald Trump is Executive Order 14159, very close to 1488. They could have made it happen. Shame. It would have been more accurate. Establishing the policy of detaining individuals apprehended on suspicion of violating immigration laws for the duration of their removal proceedings, quote, to the extent permitted by law. President Trump's call for mass deportations was matched by a surge in immigration detention nationally. The idea that they were literally holding signs at Trump rallies that said mass deportations now. You had Meemaw out there holding a sign that quite literally could have just said ethnic cleansing now. They could have just said that. It would have been a lot more succinct and to the point, but they chose a different option, different, phraseology on that one. Mass deportations are inherently violent, obviously. Any kind of deportation is. You are forcibly moving a human being against their will from one location to another. In this case, from the United States to whatever country that isn't the United States of America. And the way that the people are arrested and detained is also incredibly violent. Any kind of arrest always is. Sometimes it's justifiable, sometimes it's not. And as we've seen in the countless videos of ICE workers dressed up like masked thugs that don't identify themselves as law enforcement, and at least one has actually been found to have been impersonating an ICE officer because of the insane amounts of anonymity that have been given to these hogs in order to go around and act as the Gestapo for the Trump administration. It's an incredibly violent process. And either the people that were supporting it didn't know this, that's the good option, or they did and they're okay with it. Now, it seems to me, because of recent polling from Pew Research that we went over in a previous video, a fair amount of those people actually didn't know what that meant. They were just going along with the bandwagon. Even Republicans are now dissatisfied and are against what the Trump administration has been doing when it comes to his immigration policy. Many of them want a good pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. And obviously, pro-immigration, anti-Trump administration, and anti-Trump immigration policy sentiment is on the rise among Democrats and independents as well, even more so. But I guess some people had to see it to believe it. Even though we have a whole bunch of different instances in history where entire ethnicities have been attempted to be cleansed from a geographic area or a nation state. President Trump's call for mass deportations was matched by a surge in immigration detention nationally. In line with this policy, Trump issued dozens of other immigration-related executive orders and executive actions signed into law, the Laken-Riley Act, as part of a broader rollback of immigrants' rights in the United States. Within a month of the inauguration, the number of people detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, which should not exist in my view, in my opinion. They've been given the most insane budget, a budget in the most recent bill that was passed, a budget that dwarfs even like some militaries of smaller nations. Just a complete waste of your taxpayer dollars, the money that the government takes from you that they should be using to fund Social Security, to fund Medicaid and Medicare, to fund food stamps, to fund improvements to our infrastructure, to fund making it so that you can go to the hospital without going into bankruptcy. Medical debt, one of the few things that is unique to America when a whole bunch of other comparable OECD nations have figured out a way to get medical care to their populace to ensure a more healthy population that does not have to suffer under medical debt. Those systems may have their own problems, but they're certainly better than the United States of America's. So many better ways that your money that you made, that the government took, could be used to help you and the people you care about and your fellow citizens, is instead being used on these bloated, bored, fake jobs for these workers whose entire purpose is to ethnically cleanse the country of, in this case, Latino people. It's a very new organization in the United States of America's history, much like the Department of Homeland Security. Not particularly necessary. Throughout 2024, an average of 37,500 people were detained in immigration detention in the U.S. per day. As of June 20th, 2025, on any given day, over 56,000 people were in detention across the country, 40% more than in June 2024, and the highest detention population in the history of U.S. immigration detention. This is a W for the Trump administration in their eyes. It's a human rights violation in the eyes of normal people, however. As of June 15th, immigration detention numbers were at an average of 56,400 per day, and nearly 72% of individuals detained had no criminal history. But, if you're a criminal and you're an undocumented, then, you should be able to deport those people. Even some dumbfuck Democrats are willing to capitulate so hard to racist hogs that they're willing to go out and embarrass themselves and be like, oh, well, I want to have a strong immigration policy and to deport the criminals. They don't care if they're criminals, man. American citizens are more likely to commit crimes than undocumented immigrants are. They don't care that they're criminals. In the same way that it's not about children's sports and women's sports when it comes to trans issues, it's also not about so-called criminal migrants. They do not want Latino people, black people, brown people in the country. I was gonna say, unless they can use them for essentially slave labor, but that's not even true, because a lot of the pushback that right-wingers have given to the mass detention and deportation policy is, well, we need the farm workers and, you know, these factory farm owners who are very wealthy. They enjoy being able to hire undocumented immigrants because they can hold deportation over their head and make it so that they can't actually ask for better wages, better working conditions. They don't get a guaranteed federal minimum wage that's already too low for the average person. They can get away with paying them like $1 an hour, and if they try to fight for a better wage or better working conditions, they could just get deported. You know, the very wealthy people in this country, the capital owners, the bosses, the CEOs, enjoy being able to essentially enslave undocumented immigrants because of that. And a lot of right-wingers who are financially beholden to those people who make their money via that are kind of mad that a lot of their human capital stock, as they like to refer to their workers as, their livestock are, you know, being ripped out of the country. It's making their ability to generate profits a lot harder. Don't worry about being empathetic for the suffering of human beings. Republicans have never given a shit. Conservatives have never given a shit. Empathy for human beings, wanting to see a better world for everybody, is anathema. It's completely antithetical to conservatism as an ideological movement. The whole point is to keep things the way that they are and even regress to the way things used to be and stand in the way of any progress. To be a conservative was to oppose the abolition of slavery. To be a conservative was to oppose the abolition of segregation. To be a conservative was to oppose enfranchisement of women into the voting system. To be a conservative is to oppose literally anything good for anybody that doesn't happen to be a white, cisgender, heterosexual, Christian, rich man. There's no reason to fuck with it at all. You can make your arguments about, like, oh, well, what about the fiscally conservative Republicans that they're not in favor of a lot of this bigotry, and I don't give a fuck. They still vote for a variety of bills that allow for it. The people that vote for these politicians, they might not know the extent to how bad these things are. They might be propagandized to in a variety of ways by the Republican Party, because it's the only way they can get people to vote for them, because nobody in their decent sound mind would actually want to vote for them. Those people, if they know all of this and still end up voting for the Republican Party, there's just no reason to have any sympathy for them. Obviously, I empathize with the people who have been propagandized to and are brainwashed into voting for their worst interests and their own oppression, but specifically when I talk about Republicans, when I talk about conservatives, I am speaking of the elected representatives, and I do not give a fuck what any elected Republican or Democrat says. I only care about what they do. And what they do, when it comes to the Republicans and a lot of more conservative Democrats, is vote for terrible, anti-human immigration policy that just ends up torturing a whole bunch of people that don't deserve it. Nobody deserves torture, but goddamn, for whatever reason, the Democratic Party even has been moving further and further to the right because they think that being pro-immigration, being pro a pathway to citizenship, being pro-enfranchising a whole bunch of undocumented immigrants into citizenship so that they pay more in tax than they already do, but they also get to gain the benefits of the social safety net that we would hope to have, because currently a whole bunch of undocumented workers do pay into Social Security and a bunch of other taxes to an absurd degree, but they don't get any of the benefits at all. The amount of benefit that the country would have, that economic studies have shown, that a pathway to citizenship would have for the country, is dwarfed by any kind of cultural grievance that white people or whatever might have about, you know, seeing a brown person walking down the street. Between January and June 2025, thousands were held in immigration detention at the Chrome North Service Processing Center, the Broward Transitional Center, and the Federal Detention Center in Florida, under conditions that flagrantly violate international human rights standards and the United States government's own immigration detention standards. By March, the number of people in immigration detention at Chrome had increased 249% from the levels before the January inauguration. At times in March, the facility detained more than 3 times its operational capacity of inmates. As of June 20th, 2025, the number of people in immigration detention at 3 facilities was 111% from the levels before the inauguration. The The change was qualitative as well as quantitative. Detainees in 3 Florida facilities told Human Rights Watch that ICE detention officers and private contractor guards treated them in a degrading and dehumanizing manner. Some were detained, shackled for prolonged periods on buses without food, water, or functioning toilets. There was extreme overcrowding in freezing holding cells where detainees were forced to sleep on cold concrete floors under constant fluorescent lighting, and many were denied access to basic hygiene and medical care. 5 years ago, in April 2020, Human Rights Watch, together with the American Civil Liberties Union and the National Immigration Justice Center, reported on conditions in immigration detention under the first Trump administration. Human Rights Watch, along with other governmental and non-governmental expert and oversight bodies, have carried out numerous investigations of immigration detention conditions in the United States. This report reveals that while the second Trump administration is using similar abusive practices, their impacts are exacerbated due to severe overcrowding caused by new state and local policies, including in Florida, where this report is focused. While these latest findings in Florida inform some of the policy recommendations in this report, the recommendations are also grounded in these years of investigations and findings. There are people who have been detained in these places that have claimed to be citizens. The current Republican Party and Donald Trump himself are flirting with the idea of being able to strip citizenship from people who are legal citizens in order to be able to deport them. This is not a, oh, we're just going after undocumented immigrants thing. This isn't even a, oh, we're going after non-Americans thing. They want to be able to deport anyone they want. It might start with Latinos. It might start with brown people, but it's clearly not going to end there, because they are literally talking about being able to strip somebody like you and your citizenship from the governmental record so that they can deport you, so that they can remove you from the country. It does not only affect Latino people, it can affect you too. There was a recent report that came out, I forget from where, that said that like 1 in 4 people that were polled were afraid that either they or someone they love could potentially be deported. I think one of the main reasons, outside of all the videos of ICE hogs brutalizing random people and black bagging them without identifying themselves, which is already, for a lot of people, too much, the idea that even citizens could become targeted in the future on whatever whims the government wants. You know, when it comes to Zohran Mamdani, Donald Trump played with the idea of if he won, he would try to get him deported even though he's a legal citizen. It seems like if he wasn't Muslim, if he wasn't brown, if he wasn't of African descent, yada yada yada, just his own political views might be enough of a justification for the Trump administration to want to be able to strip you of your citizenship and deport you from the country. To what country? Who knows? Probably El Salvador, but they'll keep you in the concentration camps that the Trump administration is so fond of and is trying to model their own after. It's not only going to affect Latinos, and if you think you're safe because of that, you're out of your mind. This report finds that staff at the 3 detention facilities researchers examined subjected detained individuals to dangerously substandard medical care, overcrowding, abusive treatment, and restrictions on access to legal and psychosocial support. Officers denied detainees critical medication and detained some incommunicado in solitary confinement as an apparent punishment for seeking mental health care. Facility officers returned some detainees to detention directly from hospital stays with no follow-up treatment. They detained others in solitary confinement or transferred them without notice, disrupting legal representation. They forced them to sleep on cold, concrete floors without bedding and gave them food which was sometimes substandard and in many instances ignored their medical requirements. Some officers treated detainees in dehumanizing ways. That's always been the point. This isn't a few bad apples spoiling the bunch. This is a systemic intent, in my view, to dehumanize and subjugate a population that the current administration finds undesirable. They are treating them as less than human because they see them as less than human. And if they see them as less than human, they can justify any manner of atrocity against them. A lot of people will get mad at you if you bring up any kind of historic analog to any ethnic cleansing that was attempted anywhere in the world. Be it in like Stalin's Russia, which right-wingers love to talk about, or say, I don't know, Nazi Germany. The death camps in Nazi Germany did not start as death camps. They were not built and initially used to do the genocide of the Jewish people, of disabled people, of the elderly, of queer people, particularly Jewish people, of which, you know, all those other demographics can also be Jewish. Essentially any undesirable to the Nazi regime. They started as concentration camps, as detention centers, if you will. And once the infrastructure of those detention centers was put up throughout Germany, they were very quickly and easily converted into death camps. Because obviously, you are concentrating a whole bunch of people that you do not see as human, are held in inhumane conditions, and are propagandizing the public to the point where they hate that outgroup so much that they don't care what happens to them. It is really not a hop, skip, or a jump to think that it might have ended up the way that it did in Germany. And in the same way, it's not that much of a shock that it could end up the same way here in America. It can happen here. When Donald Trump and who was it, Pam Bondi or whatever, Ron DeSantis went to the concentration camp that is like themed around alligators or whatever in Florida, I think it was that one, it might have been another one. When they went there, did a photo op in front of the cages that were going to hold human beings, essentially as if they were livestock, as if they were cattle, as if they were cows, pigs, chickens, human beings in those cages. They were laughing. They were excited about it. They were so excited that they made a publicized event out of it. And Trump, I believe, even went on to suggest that he wanted to see more concentration camps like that built all across the United States of America. Once the infrastructure is built to be able to concentrate the population of undesirables to the administration, whoever it is, once that infrastructure, that network is set up, it is very easy to convert them into even worse facilities. And historically, we've seen that death camps are just one of those kinds of facilities. It's very easy to just like, oh, we're just going to do some new construction in these centers that are already detaining a whole bunch of people we don't like. Let's just build a couple chambers, let's say. Never mind the smoke you're seeing from these smokestacks. Ignore that. It's not hard to get there. And I don't think it's absurd to suggest that it could. Even if you do not believe that it could, even if you are in favor of the undocumented immigrant population being deported from the United States of America, you should be worried about the state being able to put anybody they don't like into these facilities without due process, because it could affect you. Who's to say if you're a right-winger and you're in favor of all of this? What if Joseph Stalin 2.0 became president in the United States of America? And this precedent of the president having unilateral power with no due process, putting people, his political opponents, people he didn't like, concentrating them into these detention centers to be deported. What if that were to come to pass? Then you might be on the chopping block, brother. This is not something that should be tolerated by anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. It's a bipartisan issue. It just so happens that it goes along with a lot of the right-wing ideas and ideals now. But what if these atrocities were flipped and they were happening to you? Or were happening to white people, like, you know, is fear-mongered about all the time. Like when Barack Obama, the milquetoast conservative Democrat, was, you know, running for election and then elected. There's no reason for anybody, regardless of party affiliation, to be willing to suffer these kinds of detention centers. There's no reason. These findings match those of an April 2025 submission by Americans for Immigrant Justice to the United Nations Human Rights Council, which documented severe and systemic human rights violations at Chrome. Combined with years of investigations by Human Rights Watch and other independent experts and groups in the US, they paint a picture of an immigration detention system that degrades, intimidates, and punishes immigrants. The report is based on interviews with 11 currently and recently detained individuals, some of which took place at Chrome and BTC, family members of 7 detainees, and 14 immigration lawyers, as well as data analysis. 2 of the facilities, Chrome and BTC, were operated by private contractors under ICE oversight. So if you thought it couldn't get worse, these centers are being funded and controlled by private contractors, aka not public organizations who are ostensibly beholden to the will of the American people. These are essentially for-profit concentration camps where they try to make money either through private prisons when it isn't about, you know, deporting all the immigrants or whatever. When it comes to arresting and imprisoning even American citizens, those for-profit private prisons, or in this case, private concentration camps, are some of the most anti-human, heinous, godless possible facilities you could ever think of. Why on God's green earth would you ever want somebody to be making money off of arresting, detaining, and imprisoning people? It does not make any sense. It does not benefit the United States at all. It does not benefit the people at all. It does not benefit the poor, the workers at all. It only makes money for the people who should, in any normal, decent society, be facing jail time themselves for being the organizers and administrators of these private for-profit institutions. But there is a profit incentive for ICE, for the Trump administration, and for the private contractors for these facilities to detain as many people as possible, which is why you're seeing such a large amount being detained, because they can make money off of the people that are being wrongfully, in many cases, detained. And if the government is not going to be subject to any kind of oversight or accountability or regulation, they can just go after whoever they want. There's money to be made, brother. You gotta make hay while the sun's up. On May 20th, 2025, and again on June 11th, 2025, Human Rights Watch sent letters to the heads of all 3 prison facilities, the acting director of ICE, the director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and the heads of the 2 companies managing Chrome and BTC, with a summary of our findings and questions. At the time of publication, Human Rights Watch had only received 1 response from Akima Global Services, LLC, the company that runs Chrome, stating, quote, "We cannot comment publicly on the specifics of our engagement." Fucking pussies. We have some photos, I believe, of people that have been detained in these facilities. We have Andrea, Arpinder Chawan, Josue Aguilar Valle, Maxim Chernyak, Pedro, and Rosa. One woman described arriving at Chrome, a facility that typically only holds men, late at night on January 28. Officers then confined her for days with dozens of other women without bedding or privacy in a cell normally used only during incarceration intake procedures. Quote, "There was only one toilet, and it was covered in feces," she said. Quote, "We begged the officers to let us clean it, but they just said sarcastically, 'Housekeeping will come soon.' No one ever came." A man recalled the frigid conditions in the intake cell where he was detained. Quote, "They turned up the air conditioning. You could not fall asleep because it was so cold. I thought I was going to experience hypothermia." This report documents serious violations of medical standards. Detention facility staff routinely denied individuals with diabetes, asthma, kidney conditions, and chronic pain their prescribed medications and access to doctors. In one case at Chrome, a woman with gallstones began vomiting and lost consciousness after being denied care for several days. Officers returned her to the same cell after emergency surgery to remove her gallbladder, still without medication. It is concerning that women were held for intake processing that could take days or even weeks at a facility primarily and historically used to detain men. Officers at Chrome used the facility's role as a men's detention center to justify denying women held there access to medical care and appropriate sanitation conditions. Because they don't give a fuck about the well-being of anybody detained here, and they also don't care about women having to be in men's prisons, or in the way that they like to talk about men being in women's prisons, quote unquote, when they fearmonger about trans women being sent to women's facilities. It's like one of the greatest debunked talking points of the gender critical, aka the anti-trans bigotry movement in the UK, that also is used in the United States in order to try to create precedents for the oppression of trans people, even though there is more documentation of the abuses against trans women if sent to all men's prison facilities than there are any documented cases of abuses of women if a trans woman is sent to a women's only prison facility. It's because they don't care. If a trans woman is sent to an all-male facility and is subject to the abuses that have been documented to said trans woman, that is a positive for the conservative, for the Republican. Much the same way that all of these inhumane conditions are not a mistake. They are very intentional, because they do not see these people as human. They see them as cattle, as livestock. And that's been the case for a long time. The fact that the mega wealthy, the CEOs, the bosses that choose to hire undocumented immigrants rather than Joe America, who's a citizen and is struggling to find a job, is because those bosses have to pay Joe America, who's a citizen, $7.25 an hour as dictated by the federal minimum wage. It's not enough, but they have to pay at least that. But when it comes to Jose, not America, I guess, an undocumented citizen, they can get away with paying them 25 cents an hour if they wanted to, because those undocumented workers who are simply trying to make money to be able to send back to their family or to use to help feed their family in the United States, they can just be threatened with deportation if they want better working conditions or if they want better wages. So they just get stuck in this kind of slavery system that treats them as less than human to begin with. And it's not even limited to just them. The fact that the federal minimum wage for US citizens has not been raised in so long, and the fact that the Republican Party and the conservatives in either party fight consistently increases to the minimum wage, regulations that allow for better working conditions for people, fight against the ability for workers to organize in their workplaces to then be able to bargain for better wages, better working conditions as a collective where they have more power than just an individual person asking for better conditions that can just be ignored. The reason why they stand in the way of lowering the retirement age so that your pop or your meemaw can actually live the golden years of their lives with dignity through Social Security, and if they want to, working part-time somewhere, because a lot of elderly people do still like to do that because it gives them something to do. It helps them feel like they're a part of their community, etc., etc. The reason why they stand in the way of making the lives of workers better, undocumented or not, but in this specific instance, citizens, people like you who might be listening, is because they do not see you, the bosses, the CEOs, the mega wealthy. They do not see you as humans either. In the same way that the immigrants, undocumented or otherwise, are currently being targeted and propagandized as being inhuman and are being treated as with inhumane conditions that you wouldn't even want to have your livestock be treated as because it would ruin the quality of the fucking meat. They still see you as a citizen in, if not the exact same way, a very similar way. They don't see you as a full human. They see you as a cog in a machine. Their actions dictate this. They don't have to tell you, even though they use words like human capital stock to, group together service workers and any kind of lower wage worker. They do not care about your well-being. They only care about you insofar as they are able to squeeze blood out of your fucking soul in order to increase the amount of zeros on their bank account. That's it. That's all they care about. And it's the same shit for this. If they can do it to these people, why can't they do it to you? Seems like they can, apparently. Authorities transferred a man with chronic illnesses from FTC to BTC without the prescription medication he needed daily, despite his having repeatedly reminding staff of his medical record. They do not care. After he collapsed and was hospitalized, they probably laughed. That's speculation on my part editorializing this report. It was not written in there if you're just listening. His family discovered he had been registered at the hospital under a false name. He was returned to detention in shackles. This substandard medical care may have been linked to 2 deaths, one at Chrome and one at BTC. Just the cost of doing business, brother. There's money to be made. Staff were dismissive or abusive even when detainees were undergoing a visibly obvious medical crisis. For example, staff ignored a detained immigrant who began coughing blood in a crowded holding cell for hours. In that case, unrest ensued, and a disturbance control team stormed the cell, forcing the men in it to lie face down on the wet, dirty floor, while officers zip-tied their hands behind their backs. A detainee said he heard an officer order the cell's CCTV camera feed to be turned off. Another detainee said a team member slapping him while shouting, "Shut the fuck up." These people, in my view, should be tried for these inhuman atrocities. And if the next administration ends up being a Democrat, a member of the Democratic Party, if it is not the case that the rampant lawlessness within the current administration and all of the organizations beneath it aren't put on trial and held to account for their lawless, godless, sinful behavior, it'll just happen again if it isn't continued under that Democratic president. The idea that the Brandon administration, that Joe Biden, who's been in politics for longer than I've been alive, did not more forcefully prosecute the election interference in the 2020 election by President Trump and his acolytes. The fact that Trump was able to run again to begin with after trying to usurp the will of the people and undo a democratically elected election result that he simply did not like, and Merrick Garland just sits on his hands and doesn't do anything, what do you expect to happen? The only way to have avoided all of this would have been to do the morally justifiable, the ethical, and the lawful thing, which would be to try everyone responsible for pushing the conspiracy and interfering in the election in 2020 and have them see justice. But it didn't happen. So now, after getting away with so many absurd crimes, there's no reason for the current administration to fear anything they do. There's no reason for them to give a damn about the fact that the Nuremberg trials happened after the collapse of the Nazi regime, because they don't expect it to happen to them, because the Democratic Party has been shown to be so feckless as they're not even willing to do the lawful, morally correct thing, which is just try people for these crimes. Meanwhile, if you are poor, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, don't have enough money to pay your bills, and end up stealing some baby formula from a store, they're more than ready to have you arrested and tried for shoplifting. Because that's just low-hanging fruit. You don't have the money for these lawyers to be able to draw out these trials for as long as possible. During another incident, officers made men eat while shackled with their hands behind their backs after forcing the group to wait hours for lunch. Quote, "We had to bend over and eat off the chairs with our mouths like dogs," one man said. They don't see them as human. They are treating them as if they are not. If they're treating them the same way that they would cattle, cows, pigs, chickens, what tends to happen to that cattle? Well, they usually end up slaughtered, right? Call me a bleeding heart liberal. I seem to think that if they are very obviously viewing the people that are in these concentration camps as cattle, I would just not be shocked if they were to follow to the logical extent of what usually happens to cattle. I don't know, that maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just a leap in logic on my part. We had to bend over and eat off the chairs with our mouths like dogs. Women and men alike reported that seeking help, especially mental health support, could lead to punishment and retaliation. At BTC, authorities put detainees who complained of emotional distress in solitary confinement for weeks. By the way, solitary confinement, literally just torture. It's never been shown to have any kind of positive effect on those that are imprisoned and have to suffer it. It only makes their mental state worse, so the idea of people complaining of emotional distress or mental health issues being put in solitary confinement, which only exacerbates any kind of mental health distress they might be in, it's just torture. Solitary confinement for weeks creating a chilling effect. One woman said, quote, "If you ask for help, they isolate you. If you cry, they might take you away for 2 weeks, so people stay silent." With the exclusion of trips to a prison library at Chrome and painting sessions at BTC, authorities provided no educational or vocational activities whatsoever. Mind you, these are not convicted criminals. These are not people who have been convicted of any crime. They haven't even been tried yet. They have simply been detained upon suspicion by masked anonymous hogs simply because often their skin tone. Like, it's one thing, and I would not support it if they were convicted of crimes. Even if you are of the opinion that people convicted of crimes can be treated this way, the idea that this is happening to people who have not even been tried for the ostensible crimes that they are alleged to have committed, and the fact that the Trump administration isn't only content with doing this to Latino people or anybody they suspect of being an immigrant, and is even toying with the idea of stripping American citizens of their citizenship, this should worry you. Doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. Doesn't matter what your political ideology is. It should be worrying to you. Lockdowns during which staff denied detained people access to medical staff and basic recreation were sometimes imposed only because the facility was short-staffed. Staff denied individuals access to medical staff and the ability to go outdoors at all, sometimes for days at a time. Detention center lockdowns, transfers without notice, and limited phone privileges have disrupted people's ability to communicate with their families and their lawyers, hindering their ability to prepare their cases and exacerbating ongoing mental health concerns. The treatment of detainees by staff at the 3 detention facilities appears to be in clear violation of ICE's own standards, surprising that they have any on paper at all, including the 2011 performance-based National Detention Standards governing Chrome and BTC and the 2019 National Detention Standards governing the detention of immigrants at FDC. Conditions in the centers also violated U.S. obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention Against Torture, and key standards articulated under the UN Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners. Because obviously they don't care. The Trump administration's one-track immigration policy, singularly focused on mass deportations, will continue to send more people into immigration detention facilities that do not have the capacity to hold them, and will only worsen the conditions described in this report. There is a growing number of agreements, 223, between Florida's local law enforcement and ICE related to detention and or deportation of immigrants that come to the attention of or are in custody of local law enforcement, but are non-citizens. These are known as 287G agreements, authorized by Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality Act. These agreements, combined with Florida's state-level policies regarding immigration enforcement and the broad application of federal mandatory detention policies, have led to a dramatic increase in arrests and detentions. Florida has, by large measure, the highest proportion of law enforcement agencies enrolled in the program of any state. Over 76% of Florida's agencies have signed an agreement. In the next-ranked state, Wyoming, only 11% of agencies have signed up. Florida, the C cannot claim it soon enough. The only silver lining of sea level rise due to anthropogenic climate change is that the national stain of Florida, and it's not the only one, may soon be reclaimed by Poseidon himself. God save all of the people in Florida who are not going along with this heinous atrocity in the making that is ongoing. There are a bunch of decent people that were so unlucky to have rolled the dice on their own birth and have been born in Florida that do not deserve such a fate. I say we put together a organization that is ready, willing, and able to provide anybody who wants to escape the absolute shithole that is the state of Florida to be able to relocate and be made whole in spite of the hell that they previously lived in, and then let the sea claim it. You know, it seems like the things I was talking about 2 and 3 years ago about Ron DeSantis and his pitiful cuckold mindset, his insecure, just blithering, pussy, bitch-made, ideological worldview, the fact that the motherfucker has to wear high heels in order to make himself feel more like a fucking man, the idea that he was gonna do these absurd, inhuman atrocities or allow for them to happen under his watch weren't an exaggeration. Either way, it's not going to stop your wife from enjoying the love and touch of a man who can actually bring her to climax. I'm sorry to say, Ron DeSantis, it just ain't going to work like that. Fucking piece of shit, pussy bitch. Other actions taken since January 2025 at the national level include designating some immigrants as, quote, enemy aliens and deporting them to incommunicado detention and abusive conditions in El Salvador, removing migrants and asylum seekers to countries like Panama and Costa Rica, of which they are not nationals, because they don't give a fuck where they're putting them. They just don't want them here. You're brown, you go to the brown countries. Get out of here. That's the entire view that they have. While denying them any opportunity to claim asylum, targeting birthright citizenship, expanding the use of rapid-fire, quote, expedited removal procedures, allowing the entry of removal orders without procedural guarantees such as right to counsel, to appear before a judge, to present evidence, or to appeal, terminating parole and temporary protected status for people from various countries with widespread human rights violations such as Venezuela, Haiti, Afghanistan, and ending refugee admissions entirely except for South Africans of Afrikaner ethnicity or other racial minorities under a policy justified, quote-unquote, by fear of future persecution. Layered on top of all of this is the Trump administration's decision to rescind the, quote, sensitive locations memo that previously protected immigrants from enforcement actions when at schools, medical clinics, churches, and courts, putting even more people at risk of detention. One person interviewed for this report was detained after attending a scheduled appointment with United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, and another was detained while at an appointment with ICE, an activist who provides support to immigrants outside the ICE office in Miramar, Florida. Every Wednesday said people are increasingly skipping their appointments out of fear they will be arrested on the spot. Quote, I've seen cars gathering dust in the parking lot, she said, quote, because people went inside for an appointment and never came out. If the people literally trying to do the quote-unquote right thing and become legal citizens through the legal process are being detained with no due process, with no reason other than the fact that they are trying to, pursue the American dream while being brown, why the fuck would anybody want to do it the quote-unquote correct way? And that's the intent. It's to stop people even from trying to pursue the correct legal channels to become citizens, because they don't want anybody who isn't white. It's so obvious. It's so simple. You don't have to think about it any harder than that. The current administration, the Republican Party, the conservative project does not want anybody but white males to have full rights, and even then, unless you have a lot of money, you're still not going to be given the fullest extent of those rights. You don't need to tap dance around the fucking issue. They just want to create a white ethno-state out of the United States of America, and any non-white person that happens to exist within it, or any white person that isn't of the religious group that they identify with, in this case, Christianity, Catholicism, those people that are here are essentially just going to be used for their labor as slaves to be able to enrich the fucking neo-feudal kings, the mega wealthy in this country that do not deserve the wealth that they have. The result of all these federal and state developments is an increasing climate of fear in which immigrants, many with no criminal conviction, avoid police, immigration appointments, and even hospitals, places of worship, and schools for fear of being detained and deported. Because why the fuck wouldn't you? You are just going to stay home, which means you can't work, which means you can't pay your bills, which means you cannot live a facsimile of a comfortable life when your life probably wasn't all too comfortable to begin with, to the point where you're going to struggle so much that your desperation to finally come out of hiding and try to be able to put food on your plate is going to get you picked up by a fucking piece of shit in a mask and sent out of the country. Nuremberg would not have gone far enough back in the day, still wouldn't today, brother. If the next administration is one that happens to be a Democrat, these people, everybody involved from the top down, need to be tried to the fullest extent of the law. It is the only way to avoid something like this happening again. Very, very strict regulations need to be put in place to prevent things like this from ever fucking happening again. And absent anything like that any Democratic politician trying to get your vote in the upcoming 2028 election or for any fucking position at any part of our government that isn't fully in favor of prosecuting everybody responsible for these concentration camps and all manner of other lawless behavior from the current administration and previous administrations, you should not be willing to vote for until they fucking capitulate to it. There is no reason to take anybody seriously who is not willing to protect people in this way. We have time as people to try to put pressure on Democrats to make it a foundational party plank to put on trial everybody responsible for this shit. And it needs to become a major party platform. And in my view, it would help the Democrats win, because recent polling has showed people like immigration. They are in favor of a pathway to citizenship. They do not like what they are seeing under the current administration and the atrocities that it's committing against immigrants and non-immigrants alike. It is a winning issue to be pro-immigration. It is better for the economy. You can look at it through that lens. It is better for a humanitarian view of the world. It is quite literally just a better option. You get better food. You get more culture that you can enjoy. There is so many benefits to it that the white people out there that are wannabe fucking kings and dictators and the people that think they are better than others simply because they rolled the dice and fell out the fucking womb having no melanin in their skin, or being, raised in a religion that isn't non-Christian, any of the people that are willing to essentially dehumanize anyone that isn't like them, it's not the way to go, man. Whatever bullshit they tell you about immigration is a lie. Factually, studies have been done on the effects of immigration on the economy, and they are positive. So many of people's favorite foods have been brought to the country because of immigration. Fucking pizza, spaghetti, tacos, quesadillas, fucking bibimbap, Chinese fast food that's like Americanized and not really even Chinese food at all, but still Chinese food because it is often run by Chinese people and is reminiscent of actual Chinese food. Fucking Korean barbecue, hot pot, all this shit, sushi that people talk about all the time. You can enjoy your burgers, you can enjoy your fucking hot dogs, I do as well. But like, so much of the shit that you enjoy in your day-to-day life has been built off of the backs of hardworking immigrants. White, non-white, doesn't fucking matter. It is only a benefit to you. And the idea that any amount of fucking propaganda pushed by people that are afraid of white women being able to actually find somebody that knows where the clit is and how to use it to make them actually experience joy for once in their life, those people, they are not looking out for your best interests in mind, okay? That's some shit you gotta work on in your own time, and deporting all the non-white people from the country is not going to help. Making it so that women are second-class citizens that are the property of their husbands and fathers like they used to be, that's not gonna help you. Because any kind of fucking life you're gonna have with a woman from that point on is not gonna be a good one. There's a reason why in the time when women were considered property of their husbands, there were a lot of husbands who ended up dying mysteriously, after being poisoned by their fucking wives, dude. It's not a good arrangement for anyone. You gotta get it together. I'm not gonna read the rest of this. There's a whole bunch more past the summary of this report that I will link to you to in the description if you want to read it yourself. I highly encourage that you do. But I hope this has given you an insight into the absolute hell that the Latino population and even non-Latinos and the undocumented immigrant or even documented citizens that are immigrants, or even birthright citizens, or even just regular ass American citizens who the current administration doesn't like are being subject to. It's something that should worry everyone because it can affect everyone. Clearly, if the current president, who is in favor of these concentration camps being set up and wants to see them set up all over the country is also toying with the idea of stripping American citizens, regardless of how they got that citizenship, of that citizenship, so that they can be deported, held in these facilities under these conditions. Who's to say it can't be you? Who's to say it can't be your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, your friend, your teacher, your professor, co-workers, your fucking parish leader, the people at your mosque, your synagogue, your temple, your church, the people at your climbing gym, your fucking Gold's gym, the people that you pass by when you're doing your morning run, the people that you see in the grocery store, the nice workers that help you bag your groceries. It easily can be. And it might be. Faster than you know it.